They gave me the hearing room assignment because I was the quietest man on the security staff. That was how Sergeant Mallory always put it. Not the most experienced, not the best in a crisis, just the quietest. He needed someone who could stand at the back of a room for 3 hours without fidgeting, and I was that man. The third floor hearing room at Harwick County Medical Center was not built for drama. It was built for liability. Drop ceiling, fluorescent panels, a long conference table for the board, a single respondent's chair facing it like something out of a school principal's office, a row of gallery seats along the wall, folding chairs, the kind that left marks on your legs. I had been in that room 4 times in 2 years. Twice for credential reviews, once for a billing dispute, once when a surgeon had been caught altering records. The room always smelled of old coffee and something faintly chemical, and the outcome was always decided before anyone sat down. I took my post at the back wall at 8:55. Board Chair Aldrich Voss was already at the table, arranging his papers with the calm of a man who knows how the afternoon ends. Voss was 60-something, silver-haired, the kind of administrator who had risen by making unpleasant things disappear cleanly. Beside him sat 2 other board members I didn't know well, and at the far end, Dr. Philip Greer, chief of medicine, who had filed the complaint. Greer had the look of a man performing patience, fingers flat on the table, jaw set, waiting for a formality to conclude. The nurse came in at 9 o'clock exactly. Her name was Margaret Caulfield. I had seen her on the floor a handful of times, night shifts, usually, in the ICU corridor with a chart under her arm. Middle-aged, plain-dressed, unhurried. The kind of woman the hospital ran on quietly and never thanked. She wore her regular scrubs to the hearing, no lawyer beside her. A single manila envelope on the table in front of her, which she did not open. She folded her hands and looked at Voss and waited. Greer's complaint was read aloud by the board's legal counsel, a thin man named Pittman, who spoke in a flat, processed tone, as if the words were already bureaucratic history. Insubordination during a code blue event. Refusal to defer to the attending physician. Alleged reckless deviation from protocol that had, in the board's preliminary judgment, endangered a patient. 3 separate written reprimands in the past 18 months. The board was convened to consider revocation of her nursing license. I watched Caulfield through all of it. She did not shift in her chair. She did not look at the floor. She looked at Voss with an expression I could not name then and can barely name now. Not defiance, not pleading, not the practiced calm of someone who has rehearsed their own vindication. It was something quieter than any of those. The expression of a person who has already decided she will not perform distress for a room that wants to see it. Greer spoke for 11 minutes. He was not cruel about it. I'll grant him that. He spoke as a man who believed what he was saying, which in some ways was harder to watch than plain cruelty. She had refused his direction during the code. She had overridden his call on a medication push. The patient survived, but the manner had been irregular, unacceptable, and the floor's culture depended on chain of command. Voss asked her if she wished to respond. She said, "No, sir, that was all." 2 words. Pittman asked her to confirm she had no counsel, no character witnesses, no supporting documentation beyond the envelope before her. She said she had no counsel. The envelope was not hers to open. It was addressed to the board. She pushed it 2 inches across the table toward Voss. He looked at it, then at her, and did not touch it. They went through the procedural close. Voss asked the board members if they were prepared to vote. 2 of them nodded. The third was writing something on a notepad I couldn't read. Greer uncapped his pen. Zzz. The doors opened. I had not heard the elevator. I had not heard footsteps. The door simply swung inward, and the man standing in it wore the dress whites of a rear admiral in the United States Navy, his chest carrying a weight of ribbons that took me a moment to fully account for. He was somewhere past 60, with the kind of face that had been weathered past the point of expression, not cold but finished, in the way that old timber is finished. Behind him, filing in single file along the gallery wall, came 11 men. They were of different ages, some gray, some younger, one with a cane, one with a prosthetic hand visible below his cuff. They wore civilian clothes, most of them, though 2 wore service dress. They filled the folding chairs and stood where the chairs ran out, and the room that had held 18 people now held 30, and no one on the board said a word. Voss found his voice. He said that this was a closed proceeding, and he asked who had authorized entry. The Admiral set a manila folder on the board's table without asking permission. He said, "I authorized it. Sit down, Mr. Voss. I had been a medic in the Army once, long before I put on a security badge. 22 months, 2 deployments, nothing distinguished. I had met 2 generals in my life, and neither had spoken to a room the way that Admiral spoke to it. Not with volume, with weight. The fluorescent panels seemed to hum louder in the silence he left. He opened the folder. He did not read quickly. Her service record, 8 years active, 3 tours. The last deployment to a Mountain Valley operation I recognized by the region, though not by the name he used. The name in her file was classified. Her unit had taken catastrophic casualties in a single engagement. Of the company that had gone in, only a fragment came out. The medic, Margaret Elaine Caulfield, had not come out with them. She had stayed. He read the language of her commendation slowly. 3 days, no resupply, no reinforcement. 11 men who could not move, tended and carried and kept alive by one woman across terrain that the after-action report described, in the flat language of official documents, as nearly impassable. She had done it with what she had on her back and what she could find. The commendation's language, even filtered through bureaucratic formality, had a quality that made the room very still. Medal of Honor, presented by the Secretary of the Navy at a private ceremony at her request with no press and no photographs. The Admiral reached into the folder and placed something on the table. A challenge coin. Heavy, scratched, the kind that has been carried a long time. He placed it in front of Voss without comment. Pittman was no longer writing. Greer had put down his pen. Then the first man in the gallery stood up. He was perhaps 50, heavy through the shoulders, with the stillness of someone who has learned to hold himself carefully. He did not say anything. He simply stood. The man beside him stood. Then the one with the cane, slowly taking his time, getting all the way upright. The man with the prosthetic hand stood. One by one, every man in that row of folding chairs rose to his feet and stood at attention. And the sound of it was almost nothing. The small friction of cloth, the tap of the cane's rubber tip on the linoleum, and yet it filled every corner of that ceiling's room. The Admiral came to attention behind the table, facing her. She had not moved. She was still sitting in the respondent's chair, her hands folded, her eyes level. She looked at the Admiral and gave him a single nod. The way you would acknowledge a debt you know can never be fully repaid. I was standing at attention. I did not remember deciding to stand. I was just standing. Voss looked at the challenge coin. He looked at the 11 men. He looked at Greer, who was studying the table in front of him with great care. Voss closed the folder he had been using and did not open it again. Whatever sentence he had been preparing, it stayed where it was. He said quietly that the board would take the matter under extended review. Nobody in the room treated that as the conclusion. The conclusion had already happened. I watched her walk out past the 11 men who had stood for her. She did not hurry. She did not look back at Voss or at Greer. At the door, she paused beside the Admiral, and he said something low that I was not close enough to hear. She nodded once more, and then she was in the corridor, and the door swung shut behind her. The Admiral looked around the room, at the board, at the gallery, at me last, and then he followed her out. I stayed at my post another hour while Pittman and Voss exchanged papers in silence. Nobody asked me to write an incident report. Nobody said anything to me at all. Driving home that night, I thought about the men in those folding chairs. 11 of them. The one with the cane, the one with the prosthetic hand. I thought about 3 days in a mountain valley with no resupply. 11 men who could not walk. I thought about a woman who had carried that into a fluorescent room and said nothing until someone else said it for her. I've been quiet my whole career. Mallory always said that was my best quality. I am not sure anymore that it is.